Incredibly sad news abroad. A popular influencer, mom, wife, only 38 years old, is now dead after a cosmetic surgery out in Russia, and now a criminal investigation has reportedly been launched. We are diving into what we know, as this now represents yet another case of a family grieving after their loved one went in for what should seemingly be a standard procedure. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber.
Компрометирующие вопросы моему мужу-итальянцу. Ты бы изменил бы мне за 100 тысяч евро per 100.000 euro?
No.
200?
No.
1 milione.
Yulia Burtseva, 38 years old, big on social media, had apparently over 73,000 followers on Instagram. She had been living in Naples, Italy, with her husband, her young daughter, documenting their life together on social media. A woman who seemed to be living a full, happy life is now dead. And the explanation, the reason, that is what we have to talk about, because it is being reported that she died after undergoing plastic surgery out in Moscow. And now a criminal investigation has been opened in connection with her death. Now, before I get into the details of this, it should be noted that a criminal case connected to a plastic surgery or a cosmetic procedure that involves a death, this is not new in Russia, okay? Dr. Ekaterina Lonskaya, a cosmetic surgeon, was originally sentenced almost a year in a penal colony after causing a patient to lose sight in her eyes after a botched procedure, only to have to get 4 corrective surgeries. But then her sentence was replaced with heading to the front lines of the Ukraine-Russia war to treat injured troops. That was a notable case. 2024, according to the Mirror, a surgeon that apparently left a Russian beauty queen disfigured for the rest of her life was convicted of negligence and was sentenced to 3 years of restricted freedom, but was actually able to escape punishment because of a statute of limitations issue. But putting that to the side, again, another notable case. Here on Sidebar, we are no strangers to these cases in other jurisdictions as well. We've covered it. We covered the case of a Mexican couple that was arrested and charged in connection with the death of Paloma Nicole Arellano Escobedo, a 14-year-old who died in September at a private medical clinic in Durango. According to reporting from multiple news outlets in Mexico, one of the suspects, so Paloma Nicole's own mother, Paloma Yasmin, told Paloma Nicole's father, Carlos, that she died from complications of COVID-19. But he apparently discovered during her funeral that his daughter had very obviously had cosmetic surgeries done, including breast augmentation. The doctor who was allegedly involved in this, reportedly, he's accused of allowing his wife to work alongside him during medical procedures and surgeries despite the fact that she didn't study medicine. So you're talking a doctor here facing charges of abandonment and improper practice of medical service. We also covered the case of Dr. Ben Brown, the Florida plastic surgeon, going on trial for manslaughter for the death of his wife Hillary, who apparently went into cardiac arrest during a procedure. The ME says she died from lidocaine toxicity. But now we go to this case. We go to this case of Yulia. According to Russian outlet MSK1, Yulia died after undergoing a surgery at a private clinic. It's a branch of the Elmas Clinic, located on Tokmakov Lane on January 4th. Now, we don't know for sure what kind of operation or procedure she was getting, but apparently there was some sort of complication. She was taken to the hospital and she sadly died, leaving behind a family. The main investigative directorate of the investigative committee of the Russian Federation for Moscow opened a criminal case under Part 2 of Article 109 of the Russian Criminal Code, quote, causing death by negligence due to improper performance of professional duties. And reportedly, the maximum sentence for conviction would be restriction of liberty for up to 3 years. We'll talk about that. But according to People, the investigative committee released a statement that was translated from Russian to say, quote, investigators from the Moscow Investigative Committee are working at the scene. Necessary official and medical records will be seized shortly. A number of forensic examinations, including a medical one, are being ordered. Okay, before we go into this, got to be real about something. Credit card debt? It isn't an accident. Every call, every fee, every high interest trap, it is a system designed to keep Americans stuck. The banks profit, the creditors win, but real families lose. Today's sponsor, PDS Debt, they help people fight back. So whether it's credit cards, personal loans, medical bills, PDS Debt has customized options to help you pay off debt faster. There's no minimum credit score that's even required. Plus, they're A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau. The system, it can make you feel like you're drowning financially, which is why I want you to find all solutions to your debt. It's your money. It's your future. Don't let the system decide for you. You're 30 seconds away from being debt-free. So get your free assessment and find the best option for you right now at pdsdebt.com/sidebar. That's pdsdebt.com/sidebar, pdsdebt.com/sidebar. So what happened here? Why did she lose her life? Was someone criminally negligent? What can we expect from this investigation? What do we know about Russian criminal investigations? I want to talk about all of it. Okay, now I want to bring in international law attorney David Teferi to talk more about this. David, thank you so much for taking the time. It doesn't seem to be unusual in Russia to open up these kinds of investigations when you are dealing with deaths that are possibly connected to these procedures. I think the law here is very interesting. When they say they're opening up causing death by negligence due to improper performance of professional duties, do you know what that means?
So some news outlets are saying that the medical care providers might be charged under Article 109 of the Russian Criminal Code. What I've seen also is that there's a similar provision under Article 118 of the Russian Criminal Code, which essentially provides for criminal negligence if you fail to meet the duty of care for providing medical assistance to a person and it causes grievous injury, which of course, in this case, it's death. So that would constitute grievous injury.
And what is the punishment? I saw under the code that's being, amplified in the media, restriction of liberty. Does that mean incarceration, or does that mean something like forced labor? What does that mean exactly?
I think it can be either of those things. So restriction of liberty gives the Russian authorities some choices. And I think the person can be detained and put in prison or could be put into forced labor, which is kind of strange because you don't think of that as being a normal punishment in the developing world, but it is still a punishment that is applicable in Russia, and it could happen. Also, the person who provided the medical care could lose their right to practice medicine for up to at least 3 years as well. So there's some other punishments that would also be associated with a finding of guilt in this case.
When they say that investigators from the Moscow Investigative Committee are working at the scene, that necessary official and medical records will be seized shortly, that a number of forensic examinations, including a medical one, are being ordered, what can we expect there? What's happening there?
Well, it sounds like they're attempting to do a thorough investigation. You never really know because all of the Russian legal processes and investigatory processes are very opaque. And, I would worry in this case that because she's an Italian citizen, so she's from a country with broken relations with Russia, Italy being part of the EU, part of NATO, participating in support for Ukraine, that she might not get a fair shake because of that. But if this were to go forward in a normal way without political influence, there should be a very thorough investigation by experts from the Moscow Investigatory Division. Hopefully it includes investigators who are experienced in investigating crimes of this nature involving poor provision of medical services. You would have to look at what is the standard of care, what would a normal doctor with this expertise have done, and did this doctor do something different and fall below that standard?
Do you know if it's common to just always open up an investigation like this if there is a death? Or is there something that happened that would indicate this was not a risk of the procedure, that it's not an accident of some kind? Do you know?
I don't know. I suspect that it wouldn't be normal to just immediately open up an investigation like this, but this got immediate attention around the world because she's a social media influencer, and perhaps that instigated the Russian authorities to take it more seriously and at least demonstrate to the world that they're doing something about this.
Do you know if these cases are common? I mean, I found a lot of cases under that specific Russian law, death from negligence due to improper performance of professional duties. There was a case earlier this year where a criminal investigation was opened in Russia over a patient who died after plastic surgery. They didn't come out of anesthesia. You're seeing several of these. Is this an issue that is potentially about the clinics there, or is there something, why are we seeing these kinds of cases, and are they common?
Well, medical tourism is common in Russia, which is kind of surprising because you would think most people would be reluctant to choose Russia as a place to receive medical care. And, in particular, this type of care is, very popular among people to get augmentations like this. And I would imagine that because Russia's economy is suffering so much, it's very hard to get currency from outside Russia into Russia, that this has actually probably become a more popular way for anyone in the medical profession to earn money. It's probably very hard to earn money from the normal Russian citizen because they make so little money. And so I would think there are incentives for doctors and nurses and practitioners to provide these types of elective surgeries to people from outside Russia at a price that is probably lower than what they would have to pay in their own country, but much higher than what they could earn from Russian citizens.
Yeah, and I'm curious what happens next, right? So I talked about some of the things that they might be doing behind the scenes. I guess the question now becomes, how does it move into formal charges? How long does an investigation take? And will there be formal charges? How does it work?
Yeah, it could take months. It could take even longer than that. Russia's a very bureaucratic country. It depends on whether there is a lot of emphasis and pressure on the investigative authorities to make this case a priority. If it were to go forward in a normal way without the exertion of political influence, it would happen probably in a very deliberative manner. But that's something the family should be looking at very closely.
What does a trial look like? How does that work? And how's it different from what we expect a trial to be here in the United States?
Well, Russia has kind of modernized its legal system since the end of the Cold War. So it's adopted some standards and procedures that are similar to what you would see in a Western court. So it would be somewhat like a trial in the United States or in England, in Europe, but different because the processes are slightly different.
I want to talk about the Elmas. So it was reported that this was an Elmas clinic, and apologies if I'm mispronouncing it. I went online, I looked up Elmas Clinic online. From what I could find, there is this website that says, quote, Elmas Clinic offers a variety of cosmetic services, including facial enhancement, body sculpting, hair transplantation, obesity treatment, dental cosmetics, nose reshaping. The clinic combines expertise and modern technology to help patients achieve their desired image with the help of experienced and efficient doctors who use the latest medical equipment and follow the best international protocols for cosmetic treatment and surgery. So if in fact the reporting is true that this was an Elmas clinic, it seems like they maybe have a main office in Turkey. This feels like a substantial operation that's now being investigated by Russian authorities.
Yeah, and the fact that it has a connection to a clinic or offices in Turkey could be a good thing for the family, because if they don't get justice in Russia, they might be able to pursue it against the facility in Turkey. And of course, Turkey has become sort of one of the headquarters of cosmetic surgery around the world. If you go to Turkey, as I do frequently, you see people who are there for cosmetic surgery. They have bandages or things wrapped around them that show that they just got cosmetic surgery. So it's a very popular place. And so it doesn't surprise me that there's a link between the clinic in Turkey and the clinic in Russia. But cosmetic surgery is becoming more and more popular. And because it's very expensive, many people choose to do it in another country where it's cheaper.
Now, I looked at the Google reviews of, again, if this is true, there appears to be an Elmas clinic in this area, right on Tokmakov Lane. And I looked at the Google reviews. And as with everything, there's good reviews, there's bad reviews. It has a 4.2, but I just want to read you some of the bad reviews and see if it's relevant as part of the investigation and this potential case. So one said, quote, a competent professional scam for money. Don't fall for a waste of time. They didn't do the procedure I wanted. I wanted to know from a professional how to properly care for my skin, but I didn't get a single answer here either. They simply filled my head with their opinions, showing photos before and after Botox. They did a cheap peeling, after which my face now looks terrible and acne appeared. I would not go to this clinic for money. If they work with cheap products, nothing good will come of it. There's another one. I'm extremely disappointed by the experience of visiting the Elmis Clinic and consider it my duty to warn potential clients against contacting this institution. My visit turned out to be not only a waste of time, but also a noticeable blow to the nervous system, as it seems to me an outright deception. Now, there is a lot we do not know, David, about what happened to Julia and the circumstances of her appointment and the procedure. Is this something that might be of interest to investigators?
Absolutely. They're going to probably talk to other patients to get an understanding of how the clinic performs and whether other patients have had similar issues. That could be evidence in the case. Those two patients who complained and wrote negative reviews, what they suggest is concerning. Although I would note that neither of them seems to be saying that they have grievous harm. It's resulted in grievous injury that would be prosecutable under the statutes that we discussed. But I think if there are a lot of patients who've been very unhappy with this clinic and can report on how the clinic fails to meet the standard of duty for medical practitioners, that would be evidence that the investigators would look at, and it could be submitted to the court.
And I'm not criticizing the Russian legal system or Russian investigators, but I do have to ask, from your experience, from what you know, how transparent will they be with the information, and how much will the family be told about what happened to Julia, and how much will we know about the trial? I guess the overarching question is how public, how available is the information regarding an investigation in a trial in a case like this, if there is even a trial?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go further than you. I will be very critical of the Russian legal system because it's not independent and because the government can influence how cases go forward. And if the government wants a certain result, the government is going to get that result. And we've seen that in a number of different cases involving Americans who've been arrested and prosecuted for crimes where there isn't sufficient evidence to show that they committed a crime, but the Russian government wanted a certain result. Brittany Griner, for instance, went through that type of situation. And so if this case stays under the radar, if the Russian government decides that they don't have a particular interest in it, then maybe it could go forward in a normal way. But if the Russian government decides for some reason, and there could be lots of different reasons, for including that it just doesn't want negative publicity, it could actually influence the decision and push the investigators to wrap up the case and with a finding that there was no evidence of any crimes.
Mm-hmm. And and that's an important point. I do want to just ask one more something. I want to amplify something you mentioned. She has a large social media following. This has been picked up by outlets here in the United States. That public attention, does that affect the Russian investigation or in any way?
That public attention affects any case anywhere in the world, and it could drive a requirement for the authorities to give the case more time and resources. However, if there's one country that is less impervious to public attention, it's Russia, because Russia gets lots of negative publicity. There are lots of reports about abuses in Russia, human rights violations in Russia, failure to live up to rule of law, and Russia ignores those. And Russia would probably be fine ignoring any criticism that comes as a result of this case as well. It has much bigger issues around the world than this one, and if it decides it just wants this case to go away, it could wrap up the decision right away. It could lock out the family, ignore the family, not respond to the family, and there's very little the family could do.
And before we wrap things up, just going back to Julia, you really do get a sense of who she was in these Instagram posts. There's one I want to call out. So she writes, "How our childhood was different. Giuseppe and I are almost the same age, 1 year difference," meaning her husband. "We often talk about childhood, comparing how we grew up, what games we played, what we were interested in, and so on. With relatively similar financial capabilities of our families, our childhood was different. Different countries, different customs. We enjoyed vegetables and fruits in the summer, and overall the diet was not very varied, but tasty. Giuseppe always had plenty of everything. Parents tried to force him to eat strawberries, for example, but he didn't want to. My family and I liked to go to the river to swim or to the village to visit our relatives. It was a holiday for us. Giuseppe and his parents traveled through Italy and other European countries by car. It was accessible. I dreamt that when I grew up, I would fly in a plane to the sunny country or go to Disneyland, and for Giuseppe, it was all ordinary. Notwithstanding, I wouldn't trade my childhood for anything else. It was a happy time. It was just harder for Soviet people to live and work. Our parents were afraid of something all the time. The food was less available and varied. It wasn't easy before for our parents. We need to remember that. And we all should remember Yulia. And our hearts and our prayers go out to her family. David Teferi, thank you so much for taking the time. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.